All right, wonderful. Hey Jen, how you doing?
Hey Pete, doing well. How are you?
Excellent. I love your frame wall is like absolutely amazing, right?
Thank you.
Like I'm just
It only took almost 2 years of a pandemic to get there.
it's absolutely fantastic. You're crushing. I think I have a virtual background up right now, but like I'm in our office here in Soma, so like my background is not nearly as compelling as your background. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm really excited about our guest here today because she's an absolutely amazing sales operations leader currently at Hopin. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But while folks are kind of like trickling in here, Jen, what's new? What's shaking? Like, any big trips recently? Any going anywhere coming?
I just was in New Orleans a few weeks ago, which was great,
What?
although it was freezing. It was the coldest week they'd had in months. So it was poor timing. Um, but
Amazing.
yeah, I have started traveling again. We're heading to Seattle in a couple of weeks.
Oh
And
man,
yeah, and
that's
there's a
fantastic.
trip to Mexico.
Did you just eat your way through New Orleans?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
there's
you
there's
gotta.
no other reason to go.
That's absolutely fantastic. Amazing. What was your favorite meal, your favorite restaurant that you went to?
Oh, there's an Israeli restaurant that I love
What?
there. Yeah,
Wow.
really, really good.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Do
if
you
I
remember the
remember
name of it?
correctly, I think it's called Shaya. Not
That's
positive.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's like such a New Orleans answer because like you would imagine be like, oh yeah, with the soul food restaurant, blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
But also because there's just like, I mean, it's kind of like sales operations and like sales leadership coaching trees where like you get people who have like come out of like really
Oh,
pipe hit.
somebody else, Grant, who's on the call, has been to Shaya.
Ah,
So great.
nice. You
Yeah.
get these like you get these like coaching trees coming out of like really amazing pipe hitting organizations. You're like, oh right, and then they go off to like make their own sales organization amazing. You get the same thing with like chefs, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have like a nice kernel there, which obviously like New Orleans has that like crazy, it just kind of goes and goes and goes. That's fantastic. And in this case, like an Israeli place.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic. I'll have to remember that for the next time I'm down there. Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and get this party started here. So welcome to Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm Pete. A little bit more about me in a second, but just to kind of get everybody familiar with Zoom here, as if you're not familiar with Zoom. Um, the whole idea around this event is audience participation. So please do use the chat panel. The whole point of this is to like answer questions live, use the Q&A panel, etc. Let us know where you're calling in from in the chat. Like if you're calling in from New Orleans, for instance, where Jen would have been calling in from like 2 weeks ago or what have you. Um, and so just for folks who are not familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros, and MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, and related disciplines. And so the community's mission, pretty simple, is to create an environment for our 30,000 and growing members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own, help them see around corners, solve problems they may not even know that they have just yet. And so the way that we do that is a number of different ways. One is through great live sessions like this with illustrious experts like Jen. And we have a robust online forum as well, and then also more so in the future, in-person live events, right, salons, which are absolutely delightful. So for folks who weren't admitted previously, we're going to go ahead and add you to the community. And so before we get started, Power Hour, just kind of reminder here, Power Hour is a unique format. It's like, we're not kind of like talking through a specific deck or piece of content or whatever. Really what we're going to be doing here is like focusing on like very specific tactical questions that you might have. There were a number that were provided ahead of time, but what we have here is like, we have an illustrious expert in the form of Jen. I'm an okay expert. I'm maybe a little less illustrious. Jen is very illustrious, and so like we're super stoked and blessed to have her here. So like we want your hardest questions on like things that are bugging you right now, and we'll do our best to take a crack at that. So this is all about like learning and what have you. So with that, like I would love to head into some introductions here. I can make mine really quick. So I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder of Modern Sales Pros. I'm also the co-founder and lead go-to-market at Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps AE, SDR, AM, managers use metrics and data to improve rep and team performance. So like all we think about is like sales math, sales math as relates to helping managers and reps get better at what they do. So that's me. And but even better is we have Jen here. So Jen, I would love for you to just like introduce yourself, let people know what you spend your time at Hopin, maybe a little bit of your background regarding like Lyft and then MemSQL or whatever MemSQL is called now beforehand. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen. I currently am the VP of Revenue Operations at Hopin, as it shows on the slide. And as Pete just said, I have been at a few startups before Hopin. So
Oh yeah.
Previously did Lyft, MemSQL, which is now called Single Store, which I think was the first place Pete and I worked
I think so.
together. And then prior to that was at MuleSoft. And prior to all of that in revenue operations, I was in investment banking. So that's a little bit of my background. It's very math based.
That's right. And Jen lives in San Francisco with her two absolutely darling dogs, Chloe and Frida. Wonderful. Well, I'm super pumped to have Jen here. So with that, we can kind of like dive into things. I think one thing, like, given that Hopin is a virtual events company, right? That obviously was like a pretty substantial like COVID beneficiary from a tailwind standpoint. I think a lot of people are really struggling with like managing remote sales organizations. Is the Hopin sales organization fairly distributed, fairly remote?
We have a very global company. I mean, even just on my team, I have folks in Berlin, Romania, Kenya,
Oh, wow.
Cape Town. So, it drives a lot of need for developing culture and making sure that there's a strong management chain throughout, because we do love being global, but it comes with a lot of issues: time zone, virtual, everything else.
Yeah, like what are some of the things that like you found to be very effective in in helping managers or helping managers do a better job of managing remote reps, whether it's like 23-year-old SDRs or like late 20 something like SMB or what have you, right? This is like kind of a new thing because like when I think actually we might have met when we were at MuleSoft, because I'm friends with Stephen Brody and Rich Liu and some of the other folks from MuleSoft. But like historically, sales have like very in-office, or at least like inside sales organizations have a very strong like esprit de corps inside, and like in-office culture, because sales is hard and like you get your ass kicked, and like it's nice to turn to somebody else and be like, man, that call sucked. And they're like, yeah, but you're still rad. And so like, how do you like, what are some kind of things that you found to make that a little bit easier for folks?
I think that's probably the toughest thing that we are always working to solve internally, is how to make people still motivated and excited to be here. As a manager, I think it's really tough also to make sure that people are working when they're remote, because it's easy to get burnt out. And as we've all seen from working from home in the last couple of years, it's harder to define working hours when you're at home with your laptop. And I think a lot of people are probably working a lot more than they used to in a lot of different ways. And that's very draining. So, our company's good at making sure quarterly in-person regional events happen, and that they do it so that there's equity in everybody being able to get to one.
How do you guys implement this? Cool to see like a virtual events company being like, and we do offline ones too. Like, how is that implemented?
So we have a great team that we call our Vibe team that handles all Vibe people, culture, making
Amazing.
sure that the virtual fun events and the in-person fun events are accessible. But on a day-to-day basis with work, there's just a very over communicating structure that I love. If you don't like a lot of pings, that's probably going to be tougher for you, but we have a lot of shout out channels and a lot of various forums on Slack and otherwise that people are recognize they can interact. And I think for managers, the big thing is accountability metrics, making sure that, you have a way to measure the work that everybody on your team is doing. And I know that in a sales world, everybody's like, oh, well, I have a quota, so I'm being measured. But I think it's a bit different on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, for sure. On the in-person events things, how do you one of the things that we do here at Atrium is we have a 10-person, we have 10 AEs, 7 SDRs or 6 SDRs, I forget which. And so the AEs are our center of gravity is largely San Francisco Bay Area, but we do have a bunch of reps. I have a new account executive who's in San Diego, right? I have an AE who used to be in San Francisco who's now in LA. And I think one of the things that we didn't really appreciate early on in the pandemic was kind of all the in-person stuff around the edges that just kind of evaporates, and you don't really kind of but I'm talking to people via Zoom, right? You don't realize the level of friction associated with Zoom or Slack or a Slack call or slacking somebody or email or what have you. So we started doing what we call office weeks. We bring those account executives in, and we try to target it it's because they're not a big formal event, which I want to hear more about you guys, kind of more formal events. It's more just you're going to come, we're going to have these folks converge into the office, right? We have an office here in San Francisco with kind of swing desks and what have you. And they're going to be here with all the other account executives. We make it a little bit of a to-do, but it's not a bunch of content during the day. It's more kind of and then we're going to go out to dinner. And then the SDRs are going to go out to dinner. And then the AEs are going to go out to dinner with the CSMs, right? And all that sort of stuff. So it can be a little exhausting because it's a bit of a week, but we try to do that every 8 weeks or so. It sounds like you guys' quarterly events are a little bit more formal, almost kind of like a sales kickoff light or something like that. Can
they're
you
actually,
expand?
I must have misspoken because they're not. They
Oh,
are.
I just probably erroneously assumed.
They're actually more social events than they are work events. It's
Yep.
the attempt at the creating real relationships and the water cooler moments that you don't schedule a meeting for that are regional. So they are planned. I would say they're formal in the sense that the company makes sure that we prioritize doing
cadenced.
them. Yeah. But they are very flexible in what we do and who joins.
What are some examples of these?
We did a boat in San Francisco last quarter. People got on a boat and had drinks and chatted and apps, and that was it. Or we've done a baseball game here.
I see. Right, where it's essentially just it's like an event that we make sure that these events happen. It's not mini SKO where it's all right, hey, product marketing, hey, whatever. It's a mini event that is purely social in nature, but not Zoom social, which can be and then you guys make sure to have it in San Francisco and then New York and then Cape Town or wherever the major centers of gravity are. Do people kind of fly in for some of those? If somebody's in San Diego and there's only 3 people in San Diego, or how does that work?
Yeah, they I don't know what the number is, the minimum number to be in an area that hosts an event, but yeah, the company does support, various people going to the closest one to be able to interact. And, much as you can imagine, as a virtual events company, we believe that the work can happen virtually and be just as effective. And so, we focus the in-person stuff on the human part of working.
Sure. Right. Yeah. The way that we kind of handle that is the kind of local geography stuff is it's like, hey, if you have like 2 or 3 or 4 people or whatever, and it's like, cool, you guys like want to go get like drinks together. Because what ends up kind of being funny is you get these like cross-functional groups that like don't really work with each other. Like for instance, we have a number of people who like, there's like people who work on MSP, and then like a customer success person, like, not a lot of engineers, but like, and then maybe an AE or whatever. And then like, they're all in San Diego or they're all in Portland or whatever. And so you don't want them to be left out. So you allow them to like create their own, like, all right, cool, like 3-person cocktails. And it's like, yeah, on me, let's go. Right. We definitely do that. I think the thing that you noted, like being proactive and like cadencing those things is really important, because if you're like, hey everybody, if you want to, you can always throw a social event, and it'll be like the company will pay for $50 per person or whatever, just like go and do it. People won't do it, right? As opposed to, like, one of the things we always joke about on our sales team here is we say that calendar is destiny, right? We're big into operating rhythms and what have you. And then I think being intentional and having social stuff like that in the operating rhythm is like really important, because like otherwise it'll always get like kicked to the curb. I think that's like really important. You had kind of mentioned the instrumentation piece. I think one of the things, like, there's like the obvious component of it where a lot of organizations are like, oh man, like all my SDRs are working from home. Are they working or are they playing Fortnite? Right. There's kind of like that component of it, which actually is important, because like, let's like, don't get it twisted. Like, sales is hard, and sometimes it's a lot easier to kind of like goof off on TikTok than it is to make cold calls. Right. But I think there's actually the flip side of that as well, where like you actually, and we've seen this because with like, even with our team, like if you're not paying attention, people will like overwork themselves. And like we've seen this as, so like you have to, like usually KPI, you think about like KPIs, like higher always being better, and obviously like bookings being higher is usually always better, but like more meetings in a given week can sometimes, like at a certain point, it can like not only go to an asymptote of value, can actually fall down, right? So, and so I think that this is something that people haven't like appreciated as much, and we've seen that with our staff, where sometimes they, like, our SDR team is pretty performant, and they'll like get a little ahead of things and like, book out the AEs, just like pave their calendars in a very muscular way. And so now the AEs are like on a treadmill, and like it then shows up in like quality metrics where like conversion rates fall off, untouched opportunity, like pipeline hygiene metrics start shit in the bed, et cetera. Not to mention just like they're tired,
right?
Right. So
They're
you
drained,
gotta,
they're tired, they're exhausted.
yeah, they're drained and tired, right? And so like they don't have untouched opportunities because like they're a turd. They have untouched opportunities because they had 5 meetings today, and they have 5 tomorrow, and they had 5 the day before, and there's literally no time in their calendar for pipeline hygiene, right? And so I think just like, it's not just like, all right, cool, are you guys actually like, taking care of business? It's also like, hey, let's make sure, because like we don't have the sales floor. We're like, man, you haven't left your desk for like 6 hours. That seems maybe a little problematic, right?
Right.
Right. Wonderful. Well, like one thing I wanted to ask you about is actually not related to Hopin, but your kind of your time at Lyft. I know that if I recall correctly, usage-based pricing and like usage-based like selling is like a very hot topic these days, because it can make it really easy for you to slide into an organization. It can just kind of be like a huge pain in the ass from like a modeling and like reporting standpoint. Like, what are some ways that you guys kind of like made that work at Lyft?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. Forecasting a pay-as-you-go business is very painful.
Yeah.
I think that it involves a lot more art than science, which is not a great answer for this group. I know we are
Put some
all
science,
people who like a formula and an answer.
put some science around the edges, but yeah, okay.
A lot of it is based on, to circle back to what you just said around Salesforce hygiene. We don't have any information if it's not entered, right? The sales team or the people on the floor, they're the ones giving us all of the insights. We can only take that and distill from it what we have. But I'd say a super regular forecast cadence, making sure every level is involved in that forecasting, and also very deal specific things. You always have the historical trends and seasonality, and for the most part, I mean, outside of the fact that I was at Lyft when the pandemic started, and that was a huge mess when people just stopped commuting to work. But
shared anything? Ew.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, goodness.
But I think that it's just really understanding the human behavior behind everything, which is not something you necessarily have to do when every deal you sign has a guaranteed dollar amount and a renewal date. And, I think it also drives the importance of marketing, and even in a B2B business, being aware of the B2C component of it in a usage-based model, the way that Lyft was, because, people are loyal and also pretty consistent in their behavior unless something goes wrong or something kind of upsets the apple cart. And so if people use Lyft regularly for their personal stuff, they will defer to using it for their business stuff too, and vice versa. And so making sure that all of your messaging and marketing is focused because it's so usage based, right?
Yeah,
then,
I think go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We've had a number of, we have a number of customers that are at Atrium that do usage-based stuff. And I think one of the things that people kind of like forget about is that like reps, like we were talking about the human component of like the user or whatever, but also there's like the human component of the rep. Whereas like, because if you think about it, what we want our SDRs to be thinking about is like an op is valuable. Like an op is generally this amount of valuable, right? Or you want your AEs, they've got like their pipeline, they've got like 10 ops or like 30 ops or like 60 ops or whatever, depending on kind of like your sales velocity or whatever. You want them to be able to like prioritize within them, like, that one, right? Like that one, don't take your eye off that one, right? And so like from a prioritization standpoint, but then also, I mean, like in sales, it's like, cool, I'm going to do the extra effort as long as I'm not having 25 meetings a week and like my eyeballs are falling out of my head. I'm going to do the extra effort on this guy right here because I know that there's like a $2,000, there's a $2,000 commission associated with that. Like I'm going to hustle, right? And so if they don't see that, that kind of like creates problems, right? It creates opaqueness, not just from like a sales operations standpoint, like, oh, like is the forecasting going to work, or like cool from a commissioning standpoint after the fact, but also that like motivational. And so one of the things that we've seen folks be very successful at there is like, just like give them a proxy, give the reps a proxy, right? Where, and like, obviously when you have like, if you're segmented, right? Like we probably have an ASP, an average selling price on a per segment basis. Okay, cool. Like that's maybe not the most nuanced thing in the world. Like generally speaking, these deals are worth 5K, or like generally like, then the next level of that is get to some sort of value proxy, like externally identifiable value proxy. Like I'll give you an example. There's this great company, Trip Actions, another COVID what's the opposite of a beneficiary? They're coming back strong. The sales organization is absolutely fantastic, and their diaspora is super rad also. So if you ever get the chance to like interact with like a Trip Actions seller, a sales leader who's no longer there, they're fantastic. But what they had was they had this thing called TBUM, Travel Business Under Management, where what they would do is like in a discovery process, you would find out like, oh, okay, cool. Like how much budget do you guys normally spend on travel in any given year? Right. And so like at least, because what would happen is ultimately the way that Trip Actions get paid is like a rake on transactions. So it would be contingent on like customer success to do a good job to like make sure people were like actually like eating the dog food. Like Brex is another example of this as well. Like you can get a Brex card, but if you don't put any money on it, it's like Brex doesn't really make out. But what you can do is you can like on a quarterly basis, you can go back and be like, cool, this is like the linear relationship between like travel budget under management and how much rake we eventually get. right? Or if you're like an e-commerce business, you can do the same thing. Like, oh, how much GM, like if you're a firm, right? Oh, how much, or like Klarna or something like that. Oh, how much GMV do you normally do in a year? Okay, we'll probably get like a 5% attach rate or whatever.
Sure.
And then you can give that as a proxy to the rep. So they're just like, oh, okay, this is really sick up and this one's okay. And like, I don't know about that one, right? And
Yeah.
at least like now you're doing a better job with that. Did you guys do anything like that at Lyft?
We did.
Nice.
Similar to Trip Actions, the ideal thing is that you're really looking for how much budget they have for travel, right?
Yeah.
In general, when people take Lyfts, there two major things that we sold, which one was, a commute program to a company. Everybody in the Bay Area sees the big tech buses going from San Francisco to Silicon Valley. And a lot of those companies often run into the issues of the shuttle broke down or the timing is off. People still need to get to work. It's not great for the company when they're not at work when they're supposed to be, productivity wise. And
turns out.
Yeah. And so we were able to kind of geofence in certain codes that companies could offer their employees whenever a shuttle was having any issues to get to the office. And so there were a lot of stats around for commutes, what those shuttles did, how often these codes were used, what area, how far the geofencing was, and what that would mean for the rides. Because obviously all of our comp was based on revenue that came from rides from whatever it was. Then there's the other portion of it where it is people who travel for work and they don't want to rent a car everywhere they go. So they take a Lyft from the airport or to their site or to their hotel and all of that. So then you get into the stats of, well, how many of you have 10,000 employees, how many actually travel for work? And when they travel for work, how far on average do they actually travel? Because now distance is a factor. And
that's
usually how long are all of their trips? And so then you do get into that. And I think for, that's a kind of quantity-based or consumer behavior-based company that can look at those things. But for everybody, I think across all different kinds of organizations, the main thing after, you do the segmentation and all of that to try to predict it is, what is your ICP? Like, who's your ideal customer profile? And are we scoring leads for SDRs to make it as easy as possible to know which ones are going to be the quickest?
Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, potentially awesome. Either the biggest deal or the fastest sale, or doesn't need an SE involved. The things that they can kind of plan their day around, because let's be honest, we're all humans, and in sales, there's only so many times you want to hear no in a row before you want an opportunity to go after that, where you're like, the odds of somebody saying yes here are
much higher.
Yeah,
I love it. There was a good question here from somebody. This was particularly pertinent to you. Is what would you say that the 2 or 3 key skill sets are that you developed that helped you move your career from a more tactical operations professional to a more strategic VP role? Like, so if somebody's more, kind of more junior, more tactical right now, what would you recommend for them to like double down on and focus on and develop in order to, pave their path to that next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I would say that as a leader, I really don't believe in anybody on my team doing anything that I haven't done before or that I don't know how to cover in case anything happens. Everybody wants to feel like they can go on vacation or the world's not going to fall apart if they need to take a sick day. I think that believing that your leaders can step in where you need them to is going to help instill a lot of confidence in you as a leader.
So the answer to that is, like, in order to like get to a strategic level, you actually have to be extraordinarily tactical across the board and like be able to like chop all the wood in order to get out of the business of chopping wood. So first, know that you like make sure that you have covered all your skill sets.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say. Do not be in such a rush to try to get to a leadership position that you forget to learn all of the foundation of everybody you'd be hiring in on your team.
Totally.
The other thing
commissions, that's like that thing over there. And then like, and then like, yeah, exactly. And then there's an error with it. And oh my God, There was $100,000 mistake. Oh,
Yeah,
yikes.
exactly. The thing is that you can't really fake it till you make it for very long when it comes to RevOps, at least. I'm
I
not
thought
sure
you just
about other
post
roles.
lots of emojis on LinkedIn and that makes you
Yeah,
successful, right?
I
Isn't
mean,
that how that
that's
works?
literally how I communicate all the time. That's how I
Oh,
got
okay. Got it. Okay. My bad.
But the other thing is that managing people and leading a team, especially, is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire career.
Oh,
And that's
yeah,
saying
yeah.
a lot from coming from banking through the '08 market crash. So it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort. And I want to really emphasize that because I'm constantly working at it, constantly learning and constantly asking and getting feedback for being better at that.
I think that's a really good point because one of the things that I like to talk about, one of like my favorite metaphors as relates to sales operations, is I like to say that like sales operations is like the product manager of the sales organization. And if you think about, and then like maybe kind of like part product manager, part engineer, because it's like, low code, et cetera, what have you. What's funny is that if you think about like the types of humans who are in sales operations, and then moreover the type of human who then either A, become a leader, right, and like systems and things that are reliable and things that are repeatable and predictable, right, and then you have humans who are messy AF, right, which is essentially what we've got as we're trying to manage sales organizations and instrument sales organizations. One of the things I always joke about is that like, yeah, like when I'm talking with investors about Atrium or other things, like, look, a sales organization is just a revenue factory. It just happens to be that the machines like are really messy, right? And have like sloppy tolerances and whatever. Now, the good news is they're like really persuasive and then they're interfacing with like other really messy machines. So it's kind of a hot mess, but you can instrument it by to the best of your ability. So then like flip it around, like you're a sales operations person trying to like model this mess, right? And like make it faster. And now you have to like, now you have your own messy people that you
Mhm.
have to contend with, right? Like it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most underrated role on a sales ops team ever that I don't think most companies even have is having a program management team for your own internal stuff. There's,
Mhm.
having a person that's actually focused on scaling and building efficient processes for your team to use is really phenomenal. And it also helps with all of our customers who are the sales org and
Right.
all of the go-to-market org. When we're operating better, everybody's operating better. But
It's like very meta, right? Like
yeah.
how can you how can you like what are the operations projects that are delivered in order to make operations like more operational? Say that 5 times fast, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's like super hard to do. There's another question. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like it's not dissimilar to engineering management in that regard, right? Where like you have people who have like very engineering mindsets who maybe are not like maybe not like the biggest
Mm.
people in the world. And now what you're doing is you're contending with a bunch of like you're managing a bunch of like non-people as well. I'm like stereotyping here, but like it like it biases in that direction, right?
Yeah.
Someone had a really cool question here around I'd mentioned pipeline hygiene metrics earlier, and so someone was asking about like what are the ways to do that. I was gonna share my screen here, but I seem to not be able to. But I think one of the things that here, I'll just go ahead and drop it in the chat there. Oh, sorry, I was just clicking the wrong button. So this is like a visualization that we like to share with our customers. It's like the AE revenue formula, like driver tree. This is like a metrics driver tree right here. Same with like a pipeline one here. And so like we got bookings here, you got wins, ASP, deal cycle, and then you of course like where do wins come from? They come from win rate crossed with attempts. And then like the question is like, oh, okay, like where does win rate come from? And so this is where like win rate comes from a high level of like high quality of execution. And so this is where you can kind of get some of those pipeline hygiene metrics, right? Like untouched opportunities is a really good indicator there. Stuck opportunities is usually like a really good example there, time between touches on ops. So this can be on a per op basis. Like if you can look at an opportunity and be like, man, this thing hasn't been touched in 30 days, or like it hasn't had an inbound email in like 60 days, like get it out of there. Come on, that's BS. Those can be like really powerful things. Other things too that can be like good indicators of like pipeline hygiene problems can also just be quantity things too, like measuring the number of ops that somebody has in their pipe at any given point in time, because like each of those ops is like a little plant that needs to be like tended to and like cared and watered and whatever. And so often, this is literally what I was talking about earlier, we had a situation where our SDR team was really kind of going ham and like waterboarding our AEs with ops. And so like the meeting volumes went crazy, right? But like, the opportunity, like new opportunity inflow was like it was kind of like, woo, this is exciting, but also was like really out of band and also like in a very fast period, right? And so like those are some kind of metrics that our customers pay attention to, and then they like, they'll visualize them, they'll set goals on them. In our case, we kind of like learn this. We're like, cool, we need to have a cap on new op inflow. You can't even just be like, hey, we want to have a minimum new op inflow. We want to have a cap on like, we want to have a goal, like a band there. And so now like Atrium complains at me if somebody's like, out ahead of their skis and be like, cool, this person has like, you're kind of waterboarding them with ops, like not good. Any other kind of metrics you'd like to add to that, Jen?
Yeah, I think another big one that we look at is how many times an opportunity has pushed from period to period. Because
Great one.
I think that,
they're going to buy.
Yeah, they're going to
buy. They're going to buy.
The other interesting thing that I often see is the, we pushed at the end of the quarter, it just slipped, but all of a sudden it's in a close date of 2 months from now. And I'm like, did it actually slip? Or, if our sales cycle is only 30 days. So that's a big one that we look at.
Pushes is a great one.
Yeah, we literally just rolled out books of business for this year, and every rep is like, I don't have enough in my books to my number. I know, shocking.
Weird.
You can't actually work 1,000 accounts at once. It's not humanly possible. And the rate of which you actually strategize when you have that much to start with just usually leads to a little bit of analysis paralysis. And so, I think that there's a fine balance in looking at that too. And then the other thing is not just opportunities that haven't had certain any activity for a certain number of days, but what fields are you actually tracking and which ones matter that actually don't have any activity that matter there, because that's going to be different for every company, right?
Like do you mean essentially like a timestamp on the last time a field's been refreshed, or what do you mean by that?
The last time any specific field has been updated. So there's oftentimes, obviously if there's no activity on an opportunity at all, you can probably say that the odds of that one closing are pretty slim, but there
might still be activity and it might still be at risk.
Right, exactly. Because what fields are actually being changed, or are we actually getting replies, or does the reply time from our customers, I think everybody naturally does this when you're not excited, when you don't know for sure if you give somebody the answer that they want, you just wait a little longer to reply.
Yeah, right? Just like leave them on red in email, right? Exactly. Yeah, I think some other, now that you're making me think about this, I think other things are like good indicators. There would be like time and stage, if you're seeing time and stage. And I think this is the thing that oftentimes what ends up happening is, AE managers have a tendency to be like over deal focused, like deals, like, focused in on like the individual op. Whereas oftentimes what can happen is you can have like a behavioral problem across the entire rep. Like, it's not that this opportunity is untouched and doesn't have inbound, or like, it's not that opportunity is untouched. It's that all of this person's opportunities are untouched, or they have like substantially more untouched opportunities than everybody else, or like their time and stage is substantially higher than everybody else. Okay, why is that? Oh, they have a really bad calendar management problem.
Yep.
Right. Like, and then being able to like attack that root cause, because then now, rather than like doing it on a whack-a-mole basis of like, let's fix this up, it's like, actually, let's fix you.
Yeah. And, not that this is a plug for Atrium, but I don't know if you remember when we were at MemSQL, we had two very intense hiring classes at the AE level where we had,
Oh, yeah.
5 to 10 reps start within the same period. And we were running a new ramp program through our enablement team. And the comparison to a successful rep, I mean, I think it's so telling so early on before you invest so much on a person of whether or not they are trending to be successful or not.
Yeah, we did a master class on like analytics and like metrics in ramp the other day. It was like a B. I need to spiff up the slides a little better, but it was like it was good in that regard. Yeah, I think those are like really good. Oh, the thing I wanted to add, just like really tactically on the like field update thing, because this is something that like, I mean, I get kind of like spun up about as well. It's like, because like think about forecasting, right? Like literally what you're doing is you're like rolling up a bunch of opinions, right? And this is why what I like, I'm a fan of like mathing forecasting as opposed to like, obviously you have to include like, oh, okay, all the amounts that then roll up to this, but then also it's like, cool, but those are just like a bunch of opinions in the pipeline field or the amount field or whatever, versus like the average opportunity value. Like you're going to say that that's that right there, but I'm maybe just going to give you credit for an average opportunity value. Right. And then we'll do both. But I think like but in a situation where you want that information to be fresh, I think I actually asked on MSP about this, and there were some really good things there. It's like if something's down funnel, round numbers in an amount field are like, really? Really? Yeah. Right? Or like close dates that are like at the end of a quarter, really? Mm-hmm. Really, like I'm not feeling a lot of specificity here. Like maybe up funnel, totally, right? Like we don't have line of sight on that stuff, but like when you get down funnel, and this is something I actually haven't done a good job on this because I don't have a sales operations person yet because the cobbler's children have no shoes. But like we use RevOps as our CPQ solution, which is great. Like our reps love it. And so like the earlier you can start modeling a proposal, the better off you are, because like now it's like, okay, it's starting to get real here. Mm-hmm. We haven't done a lot of work on like then using the information that like transfers over to the op in order to like be like, oh, cool. Well, this is there's a proposal that has been instantiated and modeled in RevOps. So like now this value is like maybe a little bit more pertinent than the one with the like pre-proposal is like, yeah, it's gonna be around this, right? Do you do timestamping on fields, or is it like how do you for the for that hygiene stuff? Not yet. It's kind of hard to do.
When you get to the end of the hopefully the end of the deal, towards the late stages of an opportunity, you are obviously looking for the things that you're looking at, but also do you have SKU level pricing? Is the quantity of everything one with just a round number typed in? That's a big one that I see a lot. It's the we're in contract negotiation, but it doesn't show up on legal queue when you're going through it with deal desk. So there's a lot of checks and balances, and I think that we haven't gotten to the point, at least in a lot of the companies that I've worked for, where we can automate that because so much of it is human.
Like artisanal. Yeah. Like it's funny. It's like, so we're blessed to work with this really cool company called Ironclad, and they make really cool like redlining software. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like if you could get like a redlining signal like back onto the op, it's like, oh, that's real.
Yeah.
Well, that's real.
We used Ironclad both at MemSQL and implemented at Lyft as well. So they are, if you can get the metadata into your Salesforce so that you
I don't know if people do it. Yeah, but it'd be great.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, it's a lot of manual work up front unless you were going to invest in a tool like that before you really had any contracts.
Yeah.
But
judging the realness is always a challenge. There's a good question here around judging sales capacity and how to determine when you should start hiring that Micah is asking here. How do you think about sales capacity, Jen?
From a RevOps perspective, I think a lot of what we're looking at is you expect, call it 70% of your reps to attain quota, right? If you're any good at forecasting and giving out quotas, I think the industry standard we've always lived by is 70% hit. So if you have 95% of your reps hitting and you think that, they're covering their cost at the 3 to 4x value, which is great for a rep, you probably have a lot of unworked leads and you can bring in some more people. So that's kind of the first thing we look at there.
Yeah, for sure. I like to, yeah, exactly. Like I like to do it because my background and kind of most of my expertise is around like early stage organizations where like you're figuring out the sales motion. So you may have like less efficient AEs because it's like more calorically intensive, whatever. What I like to do, and I just dropped a link into the chat for this spreadsheet, this model. It's a rep utilization model. Like just look at the like time that is being spent. Like, are your AEs like model a deal? Is a deal for you in like a one call close, or is it a 10 meeting thing, right? Like what is the unit of work, right? Because then what that's going to be is like that's your prototypical op, like that's your unit of work there. And then what you have to do is you have to say, oh, okay, well, like most of our close one deals take like 5 meetings or whatever, right? Or maybe so like on average, because some of them are going to close less early and some of them are going to like close, like if they go all the way to the finish line, they'll get to 5 meetings, or maybe like, or whatever. Sometimes they'll close last early. It'll be like 1 meeting, 2 meetings, whatever. And then it kind of goes away. So like figure out whatever like the time burden is associated with like a unit of work. And then you can kind of just go bottoms up and be like, all right, cool. Like based on how efficient can we get our reps? Are they, is it like Pete's organization where if we're not careful, we have people doing 25 meetings a week, maybe a little less than ideal? Or is it an organization where there's like, your reps are doing like 10 meetings a week? Okay, cool. Well, like that probably means that there's like slack and they're good. Or again, think about the other things that are required. Are your reps doing like really ornate RFP responses or whatever? Generally not, right? But like, who knows? There might be other stuff around the edges that they have to do. And then just like essentially like, cool, you've got 40 hours in a week. There's this amount of time for internal meetings. You got to have this amount of time like on the calendar for pipeline management and like inbox cleaning and things like that, or else your untouched ops go crazy. And then the rest is like useful for customer facing meeting time. And so like that's your utilization model right there. And if you get above that, if your reps are like bouncing up around that, hire more, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and always remember that it takes time to ramp reps. So don't wait till it's too late, because then your existing reps are burnt out or you're leaving money on the table. And you look at things like time to touch for a lead or a opportunity that's fast. Like, do we have, if there is so much low-hanging fruit available in what they're already doing, they're probably not worried about getting to the next new lead. So they're not hungry, which means that you probably have capacity to hire more people, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, oh man, like I can't bend over and pick up that $20 bill because I'm just like overflowing with gold bars up here. Right. It's like, cool. Well, in that situation, like let's hire some $25, like some $20 bill picker uppers, right? Exactly. Because like, I hear that's okay. Like I hear that's a good thing there. Wonderful. There was a question here around what are some good strategies around reducing AE admin work. Like it's funny, literally we're sitting here like being prototypical sales operations, sales prevention humans, being like, oh man, let's put more fields out there with validation rules and like timestamps and whatever, and the data will be cleaner, right? And then and then Sean here is like, how about making less work for the executives? Any kind of recommendations there?
From a RevOps perspective, hire in really good systems and tools people. Integrating the tools, I think is really, really key. The idea is that unfortunately we can't get a download of everything in the brain of an AE after a meeting happens. We need you to enter the information so that we can turn it into something. But the ideal state, I think any AE would say, is it'd be really, really amazing if I only had to enter it in one place, one time.
Sure.
Right? If I put it in Salesforce, does it populate my order form? If I
Sure.
put it in the notes, does that go into the forecasting tool?
Yeah.
I think that that's a big one. And then I think, when you get to the point where you can scale out a RevOps team, do I have order management? Is somebody handling the booking, the provisioning, the
Yeah.
whatever? Do I have an SDR team that's actually calendaring things for me? Do I have the right calendaring tool so that I don't have to manually go look at my availability?
Yeah. I think that that's one of the things that, I mean, obviously, like Atrium is a sales technology vendor, but like one of the things, but I'm also like, I'm an entrepreneur and I like technology because what technology does is it allows like annoying stuff to go away and like be automated or get leverage or what have you. And like, technology adoption is good, right?
Mhm.
And so you see this all the time. It always like drives me insane. Of course, like as a entrepreneur and a sales operations thinker, and of course just like a sales leader, that
Mhm.
like anytime there's like, oh, there's no budget for XYZ, it's like, oh my God, the opportunity costs of like you're just eating your reps alive with like this insane, like you're just having them piss time away and like
Yeah.
eat opportunity costs of like deals that would have closed because like I don't know, like and so you actually see this. It's like I think sales operations people can be like really good proactive like buyers,
Mhm.
right? And be like, hey, look, like it's gonna make our organization way more effective if we deploy Scratchpad,
Yeah.
right? Because what we'll do, like, oh yeah, cool, we just spent all this money on force management or like winning by design to do like a medpic deployment or whatever, and then our compliance is like absolute dog shit because like Salesforce takes like 15 seconds to load a page or what have you, versus like, cool, I just got off my call and I'm just gonna like rip out the like medic fields really good, boom, like flies over there. Now the A's are like, oh my God, I love you, RevOps, versus like, oh, sales prevention. Like and the thing is, if you look at the history of sales tech, this was part of our most recent fundraise. It's just like category after category after category of thing that at the time it was like, oh, I don't know if we need that crazy e-sign thing. And it's now like, what are you talking about? You would like,
Mhm.
you don't have DocuSign? Are you insane? Right? Or like, oh, I don't know about the call recording XYZ. And now it's just like, cool, like, do you use Chorus or Gong? Or like, or something
Right.
baked into your sales engagement solution. It's just like table stakes. And so I think that like organizations that can be more proactive about that as opposed to like react and be like, no, we can build that internally. Or like, oh, no, let's just have the reps make do. I think that that's like, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and this may be me just being optimistic and hoping that this is the case in RevOps, but I do think the trend is changing in sales leadership of viewing sales ops as sales prevention and RevOps
Yeah.
as partner, right?
Leverage.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's Sean and Kayla just wrote into the chat around why ops needs a seat at the table. So much of it is like
Yeah.
it's not about procurement buying the cheapest tool that kind of does the same thing because they don't actually understand the differences in what sales needs and why this tool is worth what it costs and it is better and it does save X amount of time and the ROI is all of these things that you
Yep.
aren't thinking about solely besides cost, right?
Yeah, totally. It's just like one of another kind of like metaphor I like to use with sales operations, as relates to like tooling and what have you, um, is like the quartermaster, kind of like the armorer, right? Like you would never take, a fighter pilot or whatever, or like, a soldier or whatever, and like give them half-ass gear, right? Because like the stakes are too high, right? And if you think about with our account executives, they have to do like 500K or like 700K or like $1 million of bookings a year, right? And so if we can get them, like if we can get their bookings from 500K to 550, that's rad, right? Or like
Yep.
to 600, that's like absolutely fantastic. Another 100 grand like is nothing, or like another like G a year for, I don't know, something like Scratchpad or Gong or Atrium or whatever is again like nothing as compared to, even if like even if it's just the incremental $10,000 or $20,000 a year, it's like not a big deal. Anyway, I mean, what the thing that always kind of drives me nuts is it like at the time, at the like if, at the frontier of like where technology is being adopted, there's all this resistance, and then you like look back 10 years later, it's like, man, how do we ever live without call recording? But at the time it was just like, no, that's crazy. Why would you, that's creepy. Why would you record calls? And like now it's just like, oh yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I first, before we ever implemented a CPQ tool at MuleSoft, I had 100 reps and I had built something in Excel that was a model that auto-populated based on what people entered.
You're a
And I
beast.
mean, most people probably on this call don't even remember before Salesforce ever had a CPQ tool that was built in. You
Right.
had to use a third party. You had to find a way to integrate it with Salesforce, and there weren't that many out there back then.
Yeah, yeah. I think anyway, like I think and then this, I think this goes back to the question earlier. I forget who was asking it about like being a more strategic sales operations, revenue operations person. It's like not being reactive per se, but instead like saying, hey, what are the biggest problems in the organization, right? And this kind of goes back to product management. Like, cool, where are the barriers in our sales team right now? Oh, are they time capped out? Right? Because they have 20 customer facing meetings a week or whatever. Wonderful. What other stuff are they doing? Can we remove that from them, either from a tooling and automation standpoint?
Mhm.
Or one of the things that we actually have in our organization, even though we don't have sales ops yet, we have like a baby biz ops team. Because like one of the things that so one of the things that's like really cool about Atrium is it takes about like 90 seconds to set up. You just like, you know, OAuth in with Salesforce and you're on your merry way, and it has, you know, you have an amazing metrics harness. But there is a little bit of like tuning that has to happen behind the scenes to just make sure that there's like the data checks are good or whatever. And so like what we have is we have like a handful of like pretty junior entry level people who are great. They're really super bright, and it's like a feeder for the rest of the organization. And so what they were focused on was like doing those like free accounts, that we call it a free account setup process, because like the setup is free for an Atrium account. And then so what they would do is they would just turn those around so the AEs wouldn't have to do it. And so then we started giving them other stuff too for the in-between times, right? Like, hey, can you do this like Salesforce hygiene thing? Hey, can you do this thing right here? Hey, can you do this licensing audit? And it's all these like recurring loops, and it's fantastic, right? It's not 100% like it's not automation, but it's like the stuff that resists automation.
Right.
And that's been like super powerful for us. And I think actually like sometimes sales ops analysts kind of get like saddled with this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But one of the things like, but if you're like spending money on like an expensive like sales ops analyst to like go do Salesforce hygiene stuff, like you might like consider an even more junior human there.
Right. Yeah, or outsourcing, or hiring a
Sure.
company, or using a tool to, you know, kind of get you started there. I mean, one of the biggest problems every company I've ever worked at faces is deduplication. And the problem is, even if you can get 90% of the way there through something slightly more
As
automated,
always,
that
yeah.
last 10%, it's always the most painful. It's like losing the last 5 pounds when you're on a diet.
It's always the hardest, right?
Impossible. So
You need a biz ops team to like to run on the treadmill for you, right?
exactly.
Yeah, that's been something that's been extraordinarily powerful for us, which has been really great. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other areas of like reducing overhead for AE teams. I mean, I think like making sure that like good like calendar logging stuff
Mhm.
there, so like people don't have to like do declaration of like event types or whatever. I think you can automate a lot of that stuff. You can use like, I mean, most sales engagement software now has that for, or you could use something like an Ebsta or IntroHive or People AI or whatever to like just like push that stuff over. Although like most of that stuff is like now becoming a feature within sales engagement software. So like doing that can be really good. I think one thing that's always really that I recommend to organizations is before you want to like force the capture of a piece of information, one, how are you going to report on it? Right. And then two, can you automate its capture?
Mhm.
Right. Like instead of like, oh, I need to create a task for this,
Right.
can it maybe be a stage? Right. So now it's just like dink, as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to declare this like specific subtask or whatever.
And if it can't be automated and you do have to enter it, how can you do it with the fewest clicks possible? Right.
Yeah.
Are we
Yeah.
asking sales reps to type a paragraph in, or are we asking them to say checkbox or no checkbox? Right.
That's a good point. Right. Yeah. Just like making it, and then that just goes back to the product manager, the sales organization thing. Is just like thinking about like this, like the CRM UI or like other processes,
Mhm.
like whether it's the Salesforce UI or like, a sales deck UI or like a Notion doc UI or whatever. Like, okay, a rep's going to come to this, and is she going to be able to like quickly see what you want to, oh, maybe we actually should reconfigure this into like buckets and have headings and whatever, because they're our user.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. Well, Jen, I told you this was gonna be fun, super fun.
Really did fly by.
I know, right? It's just like a geek sesh. It's so much fun. Thank you for coming. It's super fun. For folks who are, thanks for joining us. We're actually taking a bye week next week, but we do have an amazing guest coming up the week after that. A gentleman named Will Ibsen, who leads sales at SaaS Optics, makers of like really badass financial reporting software. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it actually is pretty badass. Their sales organization is certainly badass, and Will is badass. So please join us for that. And then Jen, thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Okay.
Of course, you too. Thanks, Pete.
Okay. Later.
Bye.